As a gamer in my 50s, I've been around for a few generations of gaming now. I started back when gaming meant sitting in front of a Commodore 64, playing the Atari, or getting stuck in Super Nintendo, or playing the Sega Mega Drive, and eventually moving through to PlayStation, Xbox, and everything else that came along with it. And back then, there was something really special about consoles. They were different. Nintendo was Nintendo, Sega was Sega. And you bought a console because there were games on that machine that you simply could not play anywhere else. And you know what? I actually think that's a good thing. Hear me out. These days, there's this idea that every game should be everywhere. PlayStation gets it, Xbox gets it, PC gets it, and maybe sometimes Nintendo. And I understand why people want that. More people can play the game, companies make more money, and nobody has to miss out. But I think we've lost something along the way. We've lost a bit of the identity of the consoles themselves. When I was growing up, you didn't just say, I'm a gamer. You were often like the Nintendo kid, the Sega kid, or whatever. You had an identity. So did those consoles. And those companies are willing to take risks because they needed something that made their console stand out. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had the Sonic, and suddenly you had two companies competing to create characters, worlds, and games that people actually cared about. And that's where exclusives can be really important. Because if every console had the same games, then eventually you'd have to ask yourself, why do I need this particular console? If PlayStation, Xbox, and PC all have the same games, then the console itself becomes more like a box under your television. And let's be honest, I've already got enough boxes under my TV. What makes a console special is the software. It's the games that make you say, I need that machine. That's what Nintendo has understood for decades. I want Mario, I need Nintendo. I want Zelda, I need Nintendo. And for many years, if you wanted Halo, you bought an Xbox. If you wanted God of War, you bought a PlayStation. That's not necessarily anti-consumer, it's competition. And competition can be a good thing. When companies have something to protect, they have a reason to innovate. And that has been a reason to create the next big thing. And we've seen this before. Sega didn't need to make Sonic because everyone else was making a Sonic game. They needed Sonic because they wanted to compete against Mario. And PlayStation didn't just arrive and say, hey, we'll make the same games as Nintendo makes. They created their own identity. They took risks. And suddenly we had games like Gran Turismo, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, and so many other experiences that helped define this generation and that generation. That's the beauty of having different platforms. You get different ideas, different characters, different styles, different risks. And as an older gamer, that's something I really miss. Because sometimes I look at gaming today and think, where's the mascots? Nintendo still has Mario, Sega still has Sonic, PlayStation has Kratos, I guess, Xbox has Master Chief, I guess. But there's the funny thing. Who is this generation's Mario? Who's the character that kids today are going to grow up and remember 30 or 40 years from now? Because when I think back to my childhood, I don't just remember the games, I remember the characters. I remember the consoles. I remember arguing with my mates about whether Sega was better than Nintendo. And you know what? Those arguments were really fun. Of course, we all have to talk about Xbox. Xbox has taken a different approach in recent years, putting more of its games into other platforms and focusing heavily on Game Pass and reaching players wherever they are. From a business point of view, I understand it. More players means more potential customers. But from a console owner's point of view, it does raise an interesting question. What is the reason to buy an Xbox hardware? And that's where I think exclusives still matter. Because hardware sales are important, PlayStation has continued to sell huge numbers of PS5 consoles, and Nintendo has had an enormous success with the Switch generation. Xbox hardware has faced a much tougher market. Now, obviously, there's a plenty of reasons for that. It's not simply because of exclusives, but I do think it shows the danger of taking away some of the reasons people actually need to buy your machine. If I can play your biggest game somewhere else, eventually I might just say, well, I'll save my money and play it over there. And that's not necessarily good for the console brand either, because the whole point of console war isn't really about destroying the other guy. It's about giving people a reason to choose you. And honestly, I think gaming needs that competition. I want PlayStation to have games that make Xbox owners jealous. I want Xbox to have games that make PlayStation owners jealous. I want Nintendo to keep doing completely weird Nintendo things that nobody else would think of doing. Because when companies are fighting for our attention, they have to be creative and they have to take risks. And sometimes those risks gives us something brilliant. And sometimes, well, they'll give us something that makes you wonder, who was drinking the beer at the development meeting? But that's gaming. You take the good with the bad. As someone who has been gaming since the Atari, the Commodore 64, Super Nintendo, and the Sega Mega Drives days, I don't want every console to become identical. I want them to have personalities. I want PlayStation to feel like PlayStation. I want Xbox to feel like Xbox. And I want Nintendo to be just Nintendo. And I want those companies fighting not with lawyers, not with spreadsheets, but with great, great games. Because at the end, that's why we're here. Not for the plastic box, and not for the logo. We're here for the games. And maybe that's the biggest thing we've forgotten. Exclusives aren't necessarily about keeping gamers apart. They can be about giving each other's console its own identity. And as an older gamer, I reckon that's something worth keeping. Because when I look back at gaming history, the things I remember most aren't the games that were everywhere. I remember the games that made each console special. Mario, Sonic, Kratos, Master Chief. Those characters became part of gaming in history. So maybe the question isn't, why can't every console have everything? Maybe the question should be, what is each console going to give us that nobody else can? Because that's where the next Mario, Sonic, Kratos, or Master Chief might come from. And bloody hell, I reckon gamer could use a few more of those. Hey, thanks for sitting this long and watching the entire video. And if you've liked this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to see more videos like this, comment down below and let the Wombat know. Take care. See you on the next one. Bye for now.